yarn workers, happy Friday. I remembered, it's 3 o'clock. I'm here. Hope your week has been going well. I got myself a little more organized this week. All the books are out the door. And for those who are getting copies or have taken a look and you felt like popping in a review, that would help me out greatly. You can do that on the website, and I think I can just pop that link in here. There's a couple different versions of the book, you know, print, digital, etc., but you can leave a review on any of those sites. It's just fantastic to have it out there. I hope your weaving's going well. I'm seeing some finished things. I'm seeing some people just starting their things. And we've had a series of good, interesting general questions to share. Most of them are coming in over on the Thinkific site. So I want to jump right into those. And then I have all this stuff on my mind because I'm editing, you know, show and tell week, but I'll save that for the end because I don't want to usurp it too much. So, thick and thin in reverse. So we've had some questions about what would happen if I reversed my color orders. If I put the gray blue in, you know, I can't remember which is in the slot. Oh yeah, gray blue in the slots and the aqua in the holes. What would that do? Well, and some of you have already discovered that you don't even have to change up the threading to change the look of your cloth because the fabric is reversible. So if you had a thin pick in the down shed and a thick pick in the up shed, if you change that and put the thick pick in the down shed and the thin pick in the up shed, you would completely change the look of your fabric. It would look like what I did on the underside. And oh, I wish I could dive in now and remember. Somebody shared their mats today, which are so cool because inadvertently she had switched that. So in the middle of the mat had this gray stripe at the end, which I think is super cool. And you can also, as I mentioned in the introduction, you can hem the placemat so the front is one side and the other side is the back side, front, back. We usually talk about cloth in terms of facing, so whatever's facing me on the loom is one side, and then there's the underside. So it's not necessarily which is the right side and the wrong side, since they're slightly different, and you may like one side better than the other. So that's something just fun to explore in general with this structure as you go on. Then there were some questions about hemming, and I'm glad today also someone shared some machine sewn hems. So as y'all know, I'm a hand sewer, and I tend to like handwork because it's seamless, not just because I'm not that crazy about dragging out my sewing machine, but when you hem, and there's nothing wrong with this, machine hems are gonna hold up really well to the rigors of the wash, etc. But as you've noticed, when you machine sew your hems, there's a little crease, and in some cloths, most hand wovens, relatively speaking, are thick cloths, you see that stitching. Now it doesn't matter per se. What I like is just that the hems lay flat and there's no stitching on top of them. So you may want to go take a look at some of those examples, but it's done. And any of those folks who did machine sew and want to share any tips, I would love it. Things like, you know, having to adjust your machine or your tension issues. And oh shoot, and the hems, making them a little finer. So if you want to even make them less bulky, you could weave them with a 5-2 or a 10-2 cotton. So that would make those hems finer. I do recommend that you use a mercerized cotton, something that's going to shrink approximately the same as the yarns that you're using in your piece. So that was another thing. Then we had just a question that came in today about knots. And I always want to clarify my knot question. I think this is going to be an excellent geeking out post. I've shared some of, Hello, Maria, are you seeing me but not hearing me? Because it looks like you're here. I have someone say I'm here and I can't see how to get to the live video. So if you're seeing me chat and you just commented on that, that's live. So you may be here. So with knots, now I teach the square knot. And I want to say that's not because I think it's the best knot in the world. I think it's the best first knot. And beyond that, there are a lot of different knots. So like I just did with Geeking Out and I rounded up the joins, I think I might go through and round up a few other Weaverly knots. Now I've shared some of Shaq's blog posts, and maybe after I go off this, I'll pop those in here as well, where they've talked about using other different kinds of knots or lashing that helps you use less loom waste. Because this project, unlike, you know, if you're making a scarf or something where you want fringe, we don't care about having any extra of that being used in our fringe. We're doing placemats. If we have this much loom waste, we'd be happy. So there's some ways that you can adjust that. Now, the only caveat I give with that, just from having taught a lot of weavers over a lot of years, is that when you're relatively new to weaving, oh, yes, iPad does not support Flash Player. Unfortunately, the whole Mac Adobe wars strike again, and they can wreak havoc in our world, and I just wish they could all get along. Particularly now, like the new iOS has updated, if you're Mac users out there, and some of the Adobe platforms like InDesign that export to PDF if you're not on that version. So, and then your drivers go out of date. So there's just all kinds of ways that they conspire to make us uncompatible across all things. So, hey Terry, good to virtually see you. So back to the knots. That knots take finesse. So I had just had this previous conversation about, you know, what knots are best. So when you're a beginner, square knot, good place, get started. Some of the other knots as you get going are really great to add into your repertoire. And I'm going to work on a blog post about that. So I love this because you guys give me so many ideas. I mentioned that on somebody's, and I think I mentioned it in this video, that the finishing video, that I feel like an oops aggregator, right? So I just kind of look across the spectrum because I get to see everybody's weaving and I see where those common oopses are, and I hope to kind of bring them together and share them. So as a teacher, sort of with my teaching methods, I will share, and I've said this before, a good first way to get things done, and then we dig down into some other ways to get things done. So hey Barb, good to see you. Kind of see you. You see me. How long? Someone else asked the question about, well, how many mats can I put on? Can I put on for, you know, 3 or 4? Because, you know, oftentimes we like a set of 4 placemats, or, you know, more than 2 or 3. A little bit of that depends on your warping technique, your warping method, and your loom. And we've covered this, say, in the 4 Looks towels or Hudson Bay throw, where the direct method, hey Terry, good to see you. The direct method, as we've encountered, and also our techniques and how well we can handle our warping methods. So with the direct method, and we're doing all that color work, then hi Barb again, I just saw you posted. I saw you joined, now I'll say hi. With the direct method, we know we get those cross threads in the back, right? With color work, that's just what we have to live with. And when you get to the end of your warp, those cross threads can cause you a little more challenge than they did in the beginning. It's not impossible to get through. And one thing you've probably already figured it out, that sometimes you have to clear your shed in front of the heddle, like put your pickup stick in and then tilt it up to get those last few picks in. Now, of course, if your warp was longer, you wouldn't encounter those crosses until you got to whatever is your last mat. But you may have already encountered with some of the cross threads and the skip slots, the longer you go, you may end up with some sloppy threads. The indirect method is going to greatly help that. And this is also a really dense warp. So kind of tugging on it as a whole unit, using the crank and yank method, no matter which, if you're using direct or indirect, is going to help you pack that beam with some beautiful symmetry. So the indirect method is going to help you get a longer warp on there in better shape, depending on your technique. You know, if you're just learning it, maybe not so much. So, and then we get back to beams. So if you have a loom that does not have those additional beams, so everyone has a cloth and warp beam, but not everyone has a front and back beam. And after I get here, I should pop in that blog post where I talk about that. So that helps you put on longer warps that stay even longer because of those beams that support them. Hey, Michelle, good to see you. I think you were the one who asked the question about how long the mat should be, and we were just talking about that, those different techniques. So, you know, those are the things that factor into putting on really long warps, more than, say, the project itself. So how long? And then someone asked about ply splitting the thin pick, which I didn't even talk about that. You know, when we're adding new weft, I demonstrated using the ply split join for the thick pick. Now I think it's weaver's choice on that. I actually just did the old overlap in the middle. So I did the same thing. I brought the pick in and then overlapped it and had two tails hanging out, and I didn't bother ply splitting it, although you certainly could. And that's the old adage, a little bit from the colorwork class. If you're adding in new weft of the same color, it's same color, same side. So I want to bring it in from the same side that it went in. New color, different side, because we're either going to be incorporating them with a ply split join or a tail tuck, and you want to spread that out over the two sides of the weft there. So yay, those were the questions. So what I've covered for those who hopped in a little later was the thick and thin reversal, right? Like if you change the thick and thin pick. So you can go back and watch that after I post it. Talked a little bit about hemming, machine hemming versus hand stitching. Knots, we talked a little bit about knots, and I'm gonna work on a blog post about that. How long can I make, how many placemats can I warp up at a time? And then the ply split join. Does anyone have any lingering questions out there that they might want to ask? How's it going? Every time we do a weave along, I think, I just want to warp up and weave this again. You know, I just get excited about whatever the technique is, because you start thinking about different colors or different ways you can apply what you've learned. And I know many of you do that, you know, in the downtime in between the weave alongs, you just warp up and do something of the same version. Or we do what I call my cleansing weaves, which is we weave something simple and soothing and we don't have to think so hard, and then we can get ready for the next weave along. Which, speaking of the next weave along, we haven't chosen it yet, and I am going to send out a survey probably next week with the ending of this weave along to survey the patron producers and see what we want to weave next. We also have the patron seminar coming up on yarn, and that will happen over on the patron page. So it'll be a Patreon live, which is coordinated with YouTube, so many places. And for patrons too, Holly and I have been working on the new handbook. I have the index ready. I've had it proofed. I just have to go over it again, and it will be a living document. So some of those kind of things that can help our Patreon life be better, I am pushing along. And to some of that, you know, I'm always striving to try to figure out how to make technology work for us. And there's a little bit of, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And there's always a little bit of constant improvement. So I am heading to South by Southwest in March and going to Interactive. And I have a whole schedule of seminars and vendors and people to talk to that I work with. So Thinkific is going to be there, Patreon's going to be there, and I'll be able to sort of sit down with representatives in person and talk to them about what I'm doing and how it's working, and hopefully be able to be smarter. And I'm sure there's very clever things I could be doing that I'm just not aware of. But I don't want to get too fancy, right? Because as soon as you figure out how to make everything work, you know, we all kind of want it to just work. So I think that's all I have for today. If anyone has any thoughts, next week is our show and tell. And what I said this in the intro and I'm going to usurp it. What I really, really love about show and tell, I mean, I love seeing your finished projects. I love seeing you make something that you're happy with and it's in use and on the table and you can enjoy it in your everyday life. But what I love best is the tell. As a teacher, the things that sort of trip you up or the things you found challenging or the things you tried that you didn't think you could do, those are the things that just make me really happy. And I also just have to say it's kind of a thrill. I mean, I design these projects with learning in mind, right? I mean, I want them to be beautiful, but I don't necessarily sit around all day and say, I want to design beautiful things. I want to design beautiful things that facilitate your learning and your know-how to be better weavers, or to be the weaver that you want to be. That's what I want for you. So, say that a lot. Just waiting to see if anyone has any questions. I will be back for next Friday for a face-to-face, and then we'll see. Maybe I'll keep doing them. Maybe I'll pop in. I just think they're kind of cool during weave-alongs to have something to aggregate some of the questions together and just give us a chance to hang out a little bit. So I hope you're warm wherever you are. I know it's been super cold in some places of the U.S. I am in New Mexico, and it's been chilly for us, but you know, that's like 30 degrees, which isn't really all that chilly, and it's still been sunny. So I hope you have some great weaving this weekend. I will check in on you tomorrow to see if there are any questions, and in the meantime, I'm running to the post office. Shaq just bought a bunch of yarn books, so I'm off to send them off to Shaq Spindle. And they are, speaking of, having a wonderful 50th anniversary celebration in September. So they're celebrating their 50th anniversary. They have all kinds of like special events and blog posts and things going on. And I'm going to pop in, hopefully do a Rigid Heddle road trip from the Shaq factory. So that's it, really. Okay, you guys, thanks so much. Have a great weekend. Heddles up.